Now, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has accused China of using Chinese students and student associations to infiltrate into U.S. college campuses. Now, speaking at the Georgia Institute of Technology, Pompeo said that China was in fact using U.S. academic institutions to steal technology research in order to carry out what he described as its plan for global hegemony. He also emphasized that Chinese students are still welcome in the United States. Now, Pompeo has called for more stringent vetting of the exchange students and also the shutting down of the Chinese-affiliated student groups. He said that these groups were used to monitor Chinese students and to carry out the agenda of the Chinese Communist Party.
The Chinese Communist Party deploys dollars just as much as it does cloaks and daggers to get its hands on valuable knowledge. There are many American scholars, often doing research funded by American taxpayers, that have been lured into the Chinese Communist Party's talent recruitment programs. The CCP pays them what is for them a fortune to do research related to their current fields for or in China, and then often uses the fruits of their brainpower to build its military strength. Students from China at American universities also live in fear that their families back home will be arrested, will be interrogated, tortured or worse, because of the things they say in an American classroom. But look, the CCP doesn't just target Chinese nationals.
This call for greater vigilance is the latest in a series of harsh attacks on Beijing by the Trump administration. On the 3rd of December, John Ratcliffe, the top U.S. intelligence official, labeled China as the biggest threat to democracy and freedom worldwide since the end of the Second World War. The two sides are also at loggerheads since China's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and its move to impose security legislations. The Trump administration has kept its pressure on Beijing with a series of sanctions. Under Donald Trump, the relations between the two largest economies are at their lowest point in decades. All right, now to give us more insights in terms of what all of this means, we are joined in by our correspondent Rachel Silverman, who is joining us live from San Francisco. Rachel, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this broadcast on WION. And let me begin by asking you this. This is a rather an interesting statement that has been put forth by the Secretary of State, the outgoing Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. What are we to make of this?
It's an 11th hour bid for the Trump administration to make itself felt one more time. Pompeo saying that U.S. schools are hooked on communist cash, accusing U.S. universities of letting China steal American science and technology and stifle criticism in return for funding from Beijing. The Secretary of State arguing that the Chinese Communist Party is poisoning the well of U.S. higher education. As Pompeo called for rigorous oversight of students and scholars from China, he said that the U.S. needs Chinese students who really do want to enjoy the fruits of our freedom. So it's really a bit of 11th hour propaganda, red baiting, you might say, from the Secretary of State in his final month of office.
Absolutely indeed. Now, according to estimates, it's being said that in the last decade, the number of Chinese students who actually come to the United States to study has tripled. And the year 2018, that figure stood at almost about 360,000. With this kind of rhetoric, will this impact the number of Chinese students who actually want to come to the U.S. shores to study?
Well, one thing to bear in mind is that we have a change of administration happening in a month's time, and Vice President-elect Joe Biden, who was part of the Obama administration when it signed agreements with President Xi Jinping, he has indicated that he will take a different tack than the current president does. So it's quite possible that the Chinese students may feel welcome come January 20th.
And also, there is this general perception that perhaps Donald Trump on the diplomatic front is trying to make things as difficult as possible for Joe Biden, who will be taking charge of the White House on the 20th of January. Is this all something that alludes to that?
Well, It certainly seems that President Trump is trying to make his mark felt as strongly as possible. He may well be trying to make things difficult for Joe Biden, but President Trump is trying to cement his legacy while he still has a chance. And we will, have to wait and see whether the Chinese respond to this and how.
Absolutely, indeed. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Rachel Silverman, for joining us and getting us all those updates there.